Hello everyone, welcome to this new video. In today's episode, we're gonna have a review about 2024. How was it on the Vietnam side? What were Vietnam's main takeaway, our main challenges, difficulties, and also how we could tackle them to try to move forward, and also what will be our expectations and then the future in Vietnam in 2025. I have today with me my buddy Vin Ho. Hey mate, happy to have you today here.
Hi Guillaume, how are you doing?
So maybe Vin, we can start by the review about 2024 in Vietnam. What were some of the main developments that happened out there?
Yeah, I think a few years out of COVID, the world economy and specifically with Vietnam, we saw an increase in import-export activity and manufacturing, especially with the ongoing US-China trade war. Vietnam seems to be doing a lot better with exports.
Yeah, I think that's maybe in 2024, there's been a recovery compared to last year. Just to give a bit of perspective, during COVID, many companies overseas buy a lot because people were stuck at home. So during 2019, 2020, 2021, they've been getting a lot in their inventory. And then after that, 2022, there start to be a slowdown for US, for Europe as well. So on the manufacturing perspective, it used to be more tough. And 2024, in most of the factories, we observed a type of recovery. So not all of them were getting 10 or 20% more in terms of orders, but most of them, at least, they could somehow recover, being more financially stable and start to get more orders from foreign markets, such as the US or Europe.
Yeah, I think it seems like Vietnam has been on the rebound. Things are good with the Vietnam-US relations. What about Vietnam-Europe and Vietnam and France? Can you touch upon that?
Yeah, very good point, Vince. So actually, France is the first European country that in 2024 signed a comprehensive partnership with Vietnam. So that's a pretty close partnerships and synergies between those two nations. And for instance, for defense, for the health sector, the safety sector, the military sector, there may be more development and synergies between those two countries. So knowing the history between France and Vietnam is quite a significant advancement into tightening their relationships. And Vin, about the recent election of Trump, he's supposed to start early January. What would be, according to you, the developments, the relationship or the challenges between US and this part of the world?
Yeah, that's a good question, Guillaume. It's really hard to say what Trump will do this time around. We can only know what he did 4 years ago, which was kind of isolate China and increase the China tariffs, and was really focused on punishing China. And then that had an effect on helping Vietnam, as you know, because many companies then started to look for alternative sourcing and manufacturing, and then naturally people looked towards Vietnam, and so Vietnam saw a big boost and increased. But again, he threatens to increase tariffs on all countries, so that means Vietnam, Mexico, Canada, and everyone else will be affected too. So it's really hard to say what will happen, but if he increases and continues to antagonize China, then naturally I think Vietnam will see more opportunities. But then again, we have to see what policies actually get enforced and gets implemented.
Yeah, this is very good input, Vin, because actually at the moment you cannot find replacement of China everywhere, right? If you are going to countries like India, Indonesia, or even Vietnam, you don't have the scale and the capacity of manufacturers that are established for decades in China. They can basically do anything at huge quantity. And just considering Vietnam versus China, we are thinking about probably 1/10 of the population. And manufacturing-wise, I think we can also take this perspective that in terms of certificates, in terms of standards, in terms of know-how, the capacity of factories in Vietnam, it will be at another scale. So businesses who are into this diversification won't necessarily find alternatives in the region. So that's something that can be struggling for the future.
Yeah, well put, Guillaume. Now, in general, it seems like Vietnam has been really good at export, a lot of activity, stealing some of the activity from China. How about move to Asia? Have you seen more or an increase in foreign companies reaching out to you, looking for products or manufacturers in Vietnam. What was that like in 2024?
Definitely, Vince. So I think early this year in March, we had a trade show. So we attended a trade show that provided to us a lot of exposure to foreign markets. And I remember meeting foreign individuals or enterprises that had in mind that diversification idea. They were doing 10 to 20 containers in China and they were looking to diversify. And actually, some of them took a move and started to manufacture in Vietnam. We do have right now one manufacturing project in furniture. So this is a French company manufacturing overseas and they are starting to manufacture in Vietnam. So it's going to be for indoor. We can share also about one project that is related to shoes. So EVA shoes. Vietnam is also one of the leading manufacturing country for shoes. You have Nike, Adidas, Asics that have their manufacturing plant in the region. And then another vertical can be, for instance, home decor with the ancestral and traditional art into the weaving. You do have in Vietnam villages of artisans that are specialized into that skill. And because to do this job is quite labor intensive, China used to do that 10 to 15 years ago, but they completely dropped this vertical. And then obviously countries like Indonesia or even Vietnam took over this product category. And then just because of the local raw materials that you can find, can be bamboo, rattan, water hyacinth, you do have in Vietnam pretty big scale factories that are actually supplying to a lot of different markets. IKEA, for instance, is buying, I think, 30 or 40% of the entire home decor products from Vietnam. You know, you have big names like that that are very strong into buying from Vietnam specific items, but you cannot find, again, anything in Vietnam.
What about companies that have traditionally made their products in China and maybe they're looking towards Vietnam? What can they expect if they're just kind of interested in testing the waters?
So the first thing that you have to keep in mind, as I explained earlier, is that not everything can be done in Vietnam. With the current capacity, R&D, machinery, raw materials, not everything can be done here. So for instance, if we talk about electronic manufacturing, most of the components will be imported. And Vietnam can act as an assembling line. So assembling, packaging, and then testing products. You do have big brands that are having their electronic facility in Vietnam. That's just one example. Then another component that you have to expect here is the language barrier. If you are going to very big established factories, you will have in-house English-speaking staff as a salespeople, for instance. But if you are going more to local factories, most of the team and the sales representative won't be speaking any word of English. They can somehow write in English by email, but as soon as you want to go deep into something, have a right understanding, you will need to rely on a Vietnamese team, so either by hiring freelancers or a sourcing agency, for instance, to help you navigate those nuances and differences. And finally, I think Vietnam is not like other markets. Here, sometimes you have to chase the factories. You have really to go there, so you have to pay a visit. You really have to spend time into building certain relationships. That may not be the case in China. In China, you can meet a factory through a trade show and then probably order a sample and you have something delivered to your home after a few weeks. In Vietnam, it's not working the same. So you will need to spend more time to be able to put that extra effort at the beginning that will probably pay off for the long run.
You bring up a good point, Guillaume. Many people, they just assume and expect that there's lots of opportunity and then Vietnam can do the same type of product and manufacturing to the same scale as China. But that's not always true because China has been set up for decades now with their supply chains and their infrastructure and their ports, so they can make product and they're very, very well polished. Whereas Vietnam, there could be some things that are missing. It really depends on the industry and the product. For example, textiles and shoes, tennis shoes, they do very, very well. You probably won't have any problems there. But now if you're talking about other types of products, maybe home and garden, or you want to make a customized product or anything like that, then you run into problems because they're not set up for that, so to speak. So it takes more investment, it takes more R&D and testing, and then building the right staff. So there could be logistical nightmares in there too.
Yeah, that's very good input, Vince. What are your predictions into the developments, either between the synergies between US and Vietnam, or just the future of Vietnam as a manufacturing hub?
I think going into 2025, it seems like Vietnam's on the right track in terms of manufacturing. You know, they made an investment a few years ago because they've tried to take in all the activity and excitement after COVID and after the trade war. So it seems like Vietnam continues to make that investment. They're building the metro line in Saigon. They're trying to build the high-speed rail that was announced not too long ago. And then in terms of manufacturing, I have a positive outlook on Vietnam's growth. I'm not exactly sure how it will end up, but it seems like Vietnam will continue to grow. More and more people look towards Vietnam as the next place to manufacture their goods, actually source their products. And so it seems like growth will continue in Vietnam overall in 2025, unless there's something unexpected. What do you think about Vietnam's future in 2025?
Yeah, I think right now the direction that we could have seen in the last couple of months and years is that Vietnam want to position itself as a China plus one strategy. So basically they want to attract foreign direct investments, they want to build up the infrastructures. You know, they really want to try to copy the model that they see from China, but they want to make it more open to the West. And when you look at the two countries, you have right now China that is somehow closing their borders. I just met someone last week who used to be living in Shanghai and told me that the expat community over there got divided by 10. And in Vietnam, I think that the country is going into the direction to attract more foreigners. We could see it years after years. And they have a policy to allow 100% foreign direct investment. So as a foreigner, if you are, for instance, going into manufacturing, import, export, consulting, IT, you can own 100% of the share of your company. And I think that's a strategic move in the sense of some countries won't allow that, for instance, in Thailand. But in Vietnam, they do allow that almost from the beginning. So they really allow foreign investment to come to the country. So of course, it's going to help the middle class to grow even more. And then it's going to help also the country to go more on the manufacturing and not anymore the low value type of products that we could think, for instance, clothing, garments, but more into the high end and the high tech. So it can be, premium products with a lot of wavings, with very premium raw materials, or also AI and also IT and high tech. We touched those topics in a previous video together. So I think that's going to be the direction that we should expect in 2025. And with the growing economy, the growing GDP, I think with all those combined effects and then the recovery that will happen probably in Western countries, it may also pull up Vietnam into getting more and more attraction as an alternative of China. And what do you think, Vin? Any last word for our audience?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary, Guillaume. We saw lots of activity in 2024. Some highlights, I would say, would be NVIDIA. The CEO, he came through there. I believe the CEO of Apple came through maybe not too long ago. So there seems to be a lot of activity and interest in Vietnam these days. And I think going into 2025, we should see more growth and, bigger and more interesting things to happen.
Thanks, mate, a lot for your insights today and our discussion. It was our recap about 2024 and the outlook for 2025. Thanks, mate.
Great. Thanks, Guillaume.
And I'ma get it right, then I'll sight like